Okay, let's see what's happening.
Americans are struggling to keep up with paying their bills.
The economy is bad.
Inflation is killing us.
We hear this way too often lately. It seems like something happened to the economy. More and more Americans struggle to make ends meet, despite the fact that record numbers of people either have a second job or a side hustle. And you know what's even scarier? What happens now in the US affects almost everyone in the world, every single country and every single person. It might be hard to believe, but the inflation in the US has the power to destroy the world's economy. And in this video, I'll show you why. But most importantly, you'll understand how to deal with the rising cost of living and protect your financial future. One of the major issues with inflation is that it's hard to measure. We constantly hear things like inflation is growing, inflation eases, and the Fed's goal is to keep inflation under 2%. Of course, at some point, we feel that prices got higher, but how does it really work? One of the practical ways to check actual price increases is to look at the Big Mac Index. It was created by the economists in 1984 to compare burger prices in different countries. It is a simplified yet pretty accurate way to look at the cost difference worldwide because the burger is identical everywhere. But then people started to track inflation using the price of a burger. Later on, the Big Mac Minimum Wage Index appeared. And this is where things get interesting. In 1980, the price of one Big Mac was 65 cents. And the federal minimum wage was at a rate of $3.10, whereas now a Big Mac on average costs around $5.15 across the US, while the federal minimum wage is at $7.25. Let's do the math. In 1980, after working 1 hour, you could almost buy 5 Big Macs. Yet today, the same working time could get you less than 1.5. To be completely objective, we should say that the number of people working for minimum wage has decreased dramatically from around 15% in 1980 to slightly over 1% today. And the US isn't alone in this price increase. In fact, since the beginning of the pandemic, some countries are facing extraordinary levels of price hikes and currency devaluation. Some of them are much worse than what we see in the States. Look at Turkey, for example. The Turkish lira lost over 70% of its value against the US dollar since January 2020, while its inflation rate soared to over 19% in September 2021. And since then, things got even worse there. In fact, Turkey's inflation rate climbed above 83% in September 2022, which is the highest level in 24 years, according to local officials. But some independent institutions say that the actual numbers are even higher and that they peaked at around 180%. Despite the high inflation and currency depreciation, the Turkish government was pursuing interest rate cuts to boost growth. This led to a big gap between official and black market exchange rates. And within 10 years, the Turkish currency got 10 times cheaper. And while these are only numbers, the ones who wind up feeling the pain is the general public, people like you and me.
My money doesn't have any value.
It's actually getting worse and worse.
And Turkey isn't the only country with a challenging economic situation. Lebanon has also experienced extremely high inflation since 2020, reaching over 130% in August 2021. Political instability, corruption, and the COVID-19 pandemic worsened the country's financial meltdown. The Lebanese pound lost nearly 90% of its value against the US dollar on the black market, which most businesses use as a reference for setting prices.
The shock you see when you go into a store.
Every day here is a struggle. It has affected us to a point where we're hopeless.
Similarly, the Argentinian peso lost over 73% of its value against the US dollar since January 2020. This year, its inflation rate reached over 100%, leading to widespread social and economic turmoil. Many Argentinians switched to using foreign currencies, such as the US dollar and the euro, because unlike the peso, those two currencies hold their value. Holding onto savings in pesos could mean literally losing their worth overnight. This phenomenon is called currency substitution, and it's common in countries that face high inflation and currency instability.
We do what we can to survive,
We've only mentioned emerging economies until now, but developed countries also face severe economic turmoil. Let's look at the UK, for example. They have the highest inflation rate in Western Europe. It broke the record at 10%. Things are not as bright as they once were for the European Union either. The Eurozone now has an inflation rate of 7%. But on the other hand, while people experience very high levels of inflation all around the globe, there's a country that doesn't feel like others, and that's Switzerland, with an average inflation rate of 2.4% annually for more than 60 years. When you ask Swiss people if inflation affected them, they simply answer,
Not that much, to be honest.
It's been all right.
Most of the things is okay.
However, this doesn't change the fact that there is a global inflation problem. So how did all of this happen? Who's in charge of that? It seems weird that so many countries have economic problems at the same time. Yet, if we look closer at how the world's economy works, everything makes sense. First of all, the economy is currently very globalized. But does the American feel the effect of inflation in the UK, Germany, Argentina, or Turkey, regardless of how high it might be? Most likely, the answer is no. Why then do people all over the world notice the inflation in the US? And why is it destroying the global economy? That's because the US is a huge player in the global market, and the US dollar is used by most people and businesses around the world. So whatever happens is the US can have a big ripple effect across the world. In this video, we talked about how the dollar gained its immense power. And if you haven't watched it yet, feel free to take a look at it after you're done with this video, of course. Now, let's take a look at how the US financial system shapes the global economy and why you should care about it.
What happens in the United States really does have an impact on the rest of the world.
One way that the US economy and inflation can affect other countries is through a process called dollarization. It simply means that people in any country other than the US start using the dollar instead of their own currency through an official or unofficial process. This often happens when a state faces economic problems such as high inflation, currency devaluation, or political stability. People may prefer to hold and use the dollar as a safe haven because they trust its value and stability more than their national currency. But this comes at a price. Their economy becomes more dependent on the decision made in the US. For example, if the American inflation rate goes up or down, it can change the dollar purchasing power in other countries. This can affect their prices, income, and trade. Dollarization can also limit the ability of a country to conduct its own monetary policy because it can't control the supply of money or the interest rates in its economy. Look at Venezuela, for example. The country has suffered from hyperinflation for years, reaching over 1,000,000% in 2018. Yeah, you heard that right. Venezuela relies on the US dollar as an unofficial alternative currency to cope with the economic crisis. But the US dollar inflation also erodes Venezuelans' purchasing power and makes imports more expensive. But still, Venezuelans don't have much choice as the Venezuelan currency faces some serious issues. Imagine that the official exchange rate in Venezuela went from 4.18 million bolívares for $1 to just 4.18 bolívares overnight as the country slashed 6 zeros off in October 2021.
Ahí estoy, como dice, luchando ahí hasta que aguanto.
Zimbabwe also has a long history of hyperinflation, peaking at 79.6 billion% monthly in November 2008, with the year-over-year inflation rate reaching a level of 89.76 trillion%. This is crazy. I feel like I'm in a tongue twister game, so to speak. So the country had to abandon its currency and instead adopt several foreign currencies, mainly the US dollar and the South African rand. However, in 2019, the government reintroduced a new Zimbabwean dollar and banned foreign currencies, which led to a rebirth of inflation. The current US dollar inflation boosts inflation in Zimbabwe even more by making its export less competitive and increasing its debt burden. And now imagine, here is the US, and here is Zimbabwe. It is across the globe, 8,899 miles to be precise. How is it even possible that the US inflation could impact them? And why do people use the US dollar so much? Well, one of the reasons why the US dollar is so important is because most of the global trade it's made using the greenback. This means many countries use dollars when they buy or sell goods, creating a high demand for American currency around the world. And when there is high demand for something, its price tends to go up. That's why the dollar is often stronger than other currencies and why some countries choose to use US dollars instead of their local money, even unofficially. Some examples of countries that are dollarized are Ecuador, El Salvador, Panama, Zimbabwe, and Liberia. These countries have different reasons for using the US dollar, but they all share a common challenge: economic instability. So now we've seen how dollars affect different countries worldwide, and it makes sense since the US is the world's largest economy. But what if I told you that even one person could provoke inflation? It might sound like I am exaggerating, and I wish I was, but history proves that it is possible. And this is the story of Mansa Musa from the 14th century. I know that it was way too long ago. That's why we use AI to recreate these events for a more immersive experience. So let's our trip begin. Mansa Musa was the king of Mali, a powerful empire in West Africa that flourished in the 14th century. He was so rich that he owned half of the world's gold at the time. Many researchers even think he was the richest man ever lived. One day, Mansa Musa went on a pilgrimage to Mecca. He took along a huge caravan of camels, 60,000 of his citizens, and thousands of soldiers and officials, all carrying tons of gold, around 18 tons of gold, they say. And as he traveled through different lands, he generously gave away his gold to the poor people and rulers he met. According to some reporters at the time, he sent around 210 kilograms of gold to the leader of Cairo just as a greeting. He also spent a lot on goods and services along the way without any hesitation. When he reached Cairo, the capital of Egypt, he caused a sensation with his wealth and generosity. He gave away so much gold that he flooded the market with it. He basically raised demand by adding so much gold to Cairo's market. So people started to buy more things. But the fact that the buying power increased didn't change the supply of goods people could buy. There was just too much gold and not enough products to spend it on. This made gold lose its value and caused prices of everything else to rise. In other words, he caused inflation followed by a decade of gold recession. At first, the people of Cairo were happy to receive Mansa Musa's gold, but soon they realized their money couldn't buy as much as before. They had to pay more for food, clothes, housing, and other necessities. Some people even blamed Mansa Musa for ruining their economy and cursed him. Later, Mansa Musa realized his mistake and tried to fix it. He borrowed back as much gold as he could from the merchants and bankers of Cairo at high interest rates. He hoped that by reducing the supply of gold in the market, he will restore its value and lower the prices. However, this did not work very well. The damage was already done, and it took many years for Cairo's economy to recover from Mansa Musa's visit. So basically, Mansa Musa brought high inflation together with his gold. Now we see the same situation happening when governments print too much money, creating an excessive cash flow in the economy. And today, the US is exporting its inflation to other countries. Every decision the American government takes impacts you, me, and everyone else, even miles away. Any action the Fed takes to fight inflation will eventually affect everyone. But there are, of course, some ways to protect your money and your financial future from inflation. What are those? Invest in assets that appreciate more over time. This includes stocks, precious metals like gold, silver, or platinum, and of course, real estate. For those looking to learn how to invest in real estate the right way, feel free to sign up for a free webinar to learn how to invest in real estate correctly. Here is the link and make sure you sign up. Diversify your portfolio. This will help reduce your risk if one asset class loses value. Pay your debts. Avoid paying unnecessary interest rates, especially if it's personal debt, like your credit cards. Spend less than you earn. Try to do everything possible to avoid living from paycheck to paycheck, and try to build an emergency fund for any unpredictable situation. The general expert advice is to save between 10 to 20% of your income. Track your budget. A budget can help you check your spending and make sure you are not overspending. Automate your savings. This will help you save money efficiently and in a less time-consuming way. Investing for the long term. If you do invest, avoid scams that promise to double your investments overnight. Investing usually pays off over the long term, whether it's real estate or the stock market. Now you know that you can always take control of your financial life regardless of Fed policies and inflation rates. You can always do something to improve your life and protect your financial future. If you learned something new today, share this episode with a loved one to help them too. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.